So what do you feel like once you got to the Mariners, both you did with your kind of approach and repertoire and what the Mariners helped you with that really seemed to click for you this year? Because the Mariners do seem to have a reputation over the last few years of helping a lot of relievers just kind of be their best selves. So what do you think they did with you?
Well, it's so crazy because like didn't they didn't change anything about me. When I got here, they brought me in and they had a meeting, and I've never had a meeting like it before. And they basically just sit you down, they put this whole whiteboard in front of you, and they just basically tell you, here's what you do really well. And even when you make mistakes, here's what teams are hitting. They're like, if you just take all of your stuff and you just put it in that box, in that strike zone, like you're gonna have success. And all they do is they just pump your tires. They're like, you belong here. You can do this. You can be a big contributor. And you start to think, you're like, okay, yeah, really, it's actually not that hard. Like, and they're like, yeah. And even though it's still hard, right? It's still the big leagues, but like they just simplify it to where you're like, wow. And they show you all those numbers, and it's just kind of eye opening because like, you know, with the Blue Jays, it was different. They were like, hey, don't do this, don't do that. Stay away from this. But then when I got here, I never heard the words don't and no and can't. I never heard those. They were like, do, and be you. That's their biggest thing is like, be you and do these things because you do them really well. You're just not throwing them, or your usage isn't here, or, you're not throwing it in the correct area. Like, all you have to do is move around your sites. They're just really smart in identifying the pitchers and the players that they want and able to get the best out of them, regardless of what they've done before. Like, they just know because they're really good with those numbers, metric wise, analytically wise, and they don't shove it down your throat. They're just like, hey, this is what you do. Continue doing that and don't get away from it. And you're like, okay. And it's funny because like I said that coming in here when I was like, I've never had a meeting like that. And then we got Trent and they had the same meeting with them. And I remember he came out uh, for BP and to throw, and he was like, I've never had a meeting like that. And I was like, I said the same exact thing. Like, and it's just like, it's just really cool and organic to see that. And, there's, after seeing what I've seen, it's not a shocker that they can get the best out of, practically anybody. I mean, look what they did with Topa. Like, that guy was in indie ball and, thinking about not playing baseball anymore. And then now he's, a high end reliever and one of the best relievers in baseball. It's just, it's incredible to watch and, especially to be a part of.
What part of your game you think benefited the most from that?
In what way? Like,
let's say in your like pitching style.
Just honestly, what I benefited from it was just trust. Like, I didn't like I said, when I was with the Blue Jays, it was a lot of, hey, don't do that, stay away from this with righties. And so I just kind of felt like I put myself in a box. And it almost was like, man, they really know what's gonna come. And the Mariners are like, you have 5 pitches. You might as well use them. All of them can play. There's not one that we think that we need to get rid of. Just throw it and trust it. And, like, I wasn't throwing my changeup that much. And they were like, how come you've only thrown it 32 times? And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, we want you to throw that a lot more. Like, obviously triple those numbers, and just do stuff. They're just stuff like that. And you're like, okay, yeah, well, yeah, that's a very simple fix, And so they're just really good at getting the best out of that player. And I for me, like, to still that confidence, and for me, like, I can't think of enough. And they've done it for a lot of people, and you could really feel like that belief, and that's huge, especially for guys that are DFA'd or up and down, and don't have a place where they've fully stayed in the big leagues. Like, for them to look at you and you can fully believe that, and it's huge.
How do you measure your success? What kind of numbers do you look at? Like, for example, in this podcast, like, we dive like really deep. We're looking at Baseball Savant, we're looking at Fangraphs, all these numbers to try and determine how successful you guys are on the baseball field. How do you as a player determine how successful you are?
Just like for me, especially for me from last year is like availability. Like, can I be a factor when you need me? Can I stay healthy, all year? Am I available to go back to back? Am I available to go, 4 out of 6? Whatever it is, that's what I looked at. In a game of, in a schedule of 162 games, like you're going to fail in between that. That's just how it's going to be. You can't be perfect. Not everybody can be the Josh Haters of the world, or, whoever else is doing it, but you're going to fail. And so for me, it's just like, can I get back out there? Can I do it again? And just to be available, like, I know everybody loves to go analytically driven, that's to determine the success of a player, but and I think in our world we don't look at those numbers as much as the fans do. Yeah, it can play a factor, and it's a good measure to see where you're at, but like that's not all that we look at. We're looking at, okay, well, you know what was the score of the game? Did I give our team a chance to win the game? Okay, yes. I might have gave up that game tying run, but it's still tied, and we're still going into the eighth with the top of our lineup coming up. There's still a chance to win this ball game. Just stuff like that. And I think that's what a lot of us do, and especially for me, that's how I look at it.
So you might not check your ERA, but what about some of those things like you go in the bullpen and you get, full video breakdown of, mechanically and release point and stuff like that. Is there a number or something specific you look in there to measure that a little bit more, or is it just what you said?
No, I think it's just what I said. If anything, like
Okay.
the numbers I'm looking at are just like, hey, what has this hitter done, in the last like 10 games? What, is he hot or is he cold? Like, just stuff like that. Like, though, I can, if I start looking at my numbers and then I'm like, oh my God, I have a 2.8. Now I'm pitching for my numbers. I'm not pitching for the game or for the outs. I'm like, well, hopefully I don't get over 3, or hopefully, I keep this around 2. And then that's when things start to unravel. And and so I'm not ever really looking at that stuff. Yeah, it's cool to have good numbers. Yeah, that's great, fantastic. Obviously you need that if you're going to stick around, but at the end of the day, like, I'm still getting outs, I'm still doing the right things. I might get kicked in the stomach here every once in a while, but at the end of the day, I'm available, I'm healthy. You can count on me to go out there when you need me. So that's the main goal for me.
Okay, how tough is it to go back to back or to go 3 in a row? Because sometimes, like for fans watching at home, I think you see people sit there and say, "Oh, like, are they going to use this guy?" It's like, "Oh, well, he pitched the night before, and maybe he's down today," for example. Like for you guys, like how much does that take to get out there for the second day in a row, or even the third day in a row every now and then when guys go 3 straight? Like what goes into that?
I mean, it's very tough because again, like a lot of the times, like what obviously like what the fans don't see is like obviously you go back to back and sometimes that second day doesn't go well. They didn't see that we might have warmed up 3 times in a row and but didn't get in the game, and then on that fourth time we eventually get into the game, and then you go in the game and it's like, well, you only threw 10 pitches. Well, they don't count the warm-up pitches yesterday, so you're hanging a little bit, you're dragging, so like that, and your body always feels a little differently. It's never like how it did on the first day when you had time down. And so it's like you have to go back and you have to try and focus in on your mechanics, and that can always get in the way when instead of you're just focusing on throwing strikes, now you're like, all right, am I on time, or am I behind, or whatever it is. Like that second day is always a little bit tougher. Some days now it's always different depending on the month. If we're like, in, let's say, September compared to March or whatever it is, right? Like, August, September back to back is going to suck a little worse compared to the beginning of the year. Obviously when you're fresh and you have those bullets reserved. But yeah, I mean, it's tough. But again, if you want to be a reliever and you want to stay in this league, it's volatile, but you have to do it, and you just mental fortitude more than anything, and just grind through it. That's all. And like that's why it's even just like impressive to watch what like Matt Brash did this year. Like that guy's pitching in almost half of our games, and in year where you have to face a 3-batter minimum compared to when you could just go in there and face one righty or one lefty, and you've racked up 90 appearances, and that's great, but you're only pitching point one. But to see what Brash did, that was just like, man. And to consistently go out there and he's still 97, 99, 100 every single time, you're like, dude, how is this guy doing it? And obviously the trainers they do a great job on keeping us healthy and allowing us to do what we need to do to recover. A lot of guys will be like, well, you did this or you did that. And the Mariners like, hey, if this makes you feel good and you trust us and you want to do that, do it. So I think that's obviously a huge part in that. And so it's just, yeah, I mean, you got to get through it a little bit.
What was your reaction when you first saw a Matt Brash slider?
In awe. It's just like ridiculous. Like, how is he making a ball move at that? And then when I'm like, I kind of want to try in that. And then you go and look at his grip and you're like, never mind. Like, it's like, he's just so unique in everything that he does. Like, you just can't copy it. And, it's like, how is like so much power coming out of that small body, And he's one of the best. And yeah, it's awesome to watch him go out there and make guys look foolish, because again, like, not many people are able to spin batters around as much and frequently as he does it. And so it's just like, that just goes to show you like how gross his stuff is. And he's truly special.